Start recording. Okay. So where we left off, we had thrown together the very simplest of simple menu systems. No wraparound. It thinks that top option is an option, and then we hit OK on any option, it goes and activates this exit function here. So the first thing we're going to do is try and debug that. So can you in fact zoom in your text just a smidge so I can actually read it and capture it. That's much better. Okay, so over in main menu, so I've commented out this thing. We'll come back to that. Come back to that in a moment. So how do you reckon we would go about debugging this?
Probably draw some information on the screen.
All right. Well, we just so happen to have this nice UI label thing, so we could do that. So now UI update is global, so I can just write. Okay. Just spit this out. I think that's all of the possible things we could spit out. This is why it's nice to have like things be public. Mm-hmm. It's just like, yeah, I want to debug now, and so
yeah, right away it's already wrong.
Yeah, so the current index is 7. Well, that's correct because main menu is 0. Start game is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then
that's why
7 is
wrong.
5, and the next thing is 6, and so the current index would be the next insertion point. So it's actually correct. So there's 7 items, and the current index is 7.
Well,
is it actually?
Wait a minute. I'm missing. Am I missing something?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, it should be 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this should be 6.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so. It's the current index when it was printed should have been itself's index. And
yeah, it
itself
should have
would have been 6.
Exactly, it should have been. Well, no, it should have been 5. That's very odd.
Yes, you're right. It should have been 5.
So it should evaluate that, and then text should be 5. Oh. Well, that's already very interesting. Because it's UI update. That makes sense. So when it goes to draw it, it's running this whole thing again.
Oh, right.
So already we're running into like the perils of doing the system this way. Because the update
context switching.
Now, that being said, it's unlikely that we'll ever actually necessarily do this. But that is something to watch out for, and that is that the UI update in the draw method is going to be the UI update from this point in the code.
Well, hold on. I mean, we say it does it again, but it's under a different system. So the UI update.
So you can see this is in update.
Oh yeah. 0.
And then if I hit run
3,
again,
4, 5, 6.
we're in draw, and so now, and I mouse over this, it's like 7. It's like, yeah, that is 7 because obviously I can't pull that over now, but yeah, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 is the insertion point. So that's fine. But that
I still don't. I think it should be 6, the insertion point. I mean, am I just losing my mind? Main menu 0. Start more games 1, 2, 3, 4. Like we shouldn't have incremented just because, like, we're in the draw we should be in the draw aspect, right?
Yeah. So look at the call stack. So you can see draw here. Yeah. And in draw, this is 7 because that was the last insertion point. Whereas if we run update, where in update it's 5 because that's where we are,
Oh.
and then we're 6, and then we stick a level label it, and then we're 7. So
okay, absolutely. Okay.
already,
yeah, that's a bit hard to grok. Yeah.
that's concerning from a debuggability standpoint already, but we should press ahead because this is not something you're likely to do, but that is worth noting that it's not a great idea to be inserting things that are difficult to grok into the system.
Right.
So anyway, we can carry on. So now we have that tested. Just get rid of the breakpoint.
I still don't like that I still don't like that we can be nowhere for the first selection. Like 0 is the main menu, but it's not really. The 0th choice should probably be the start game, but that's probably not an issue that we're thinking about right now.
So that's the next issue to deal with, is going to be that, and we'll deal with that in the context of the fact that we want to be able to deal with this situation here when we oh, it's 64-bit. I can't do that. All right. This situation here, where we've got this option that keeps getting added, and it's like, well, we've selected. Which one have we selected? So we'll deal with that when we go to do that.
Yeah, I think the idea though right now is that when we left last time, I could go to any of these options and press a button, and it would exit the game.
Exactly. So let's try and figure out why that is. So we've got the text in there. So what does the text tell us is probably the next question. It's probably not going to tell us much because as we discovered, it's the UI update at the end of the thing. So it's like the 7th option. It's just telling us there are 7 options in the menu, or 7 entries, and it's telling us what the selected index is, which doesn't really change. So, I mean, we've verified that these are correct, but we actually have to look at them during the update. So we could, I mean, we could, if we're concerned about that, we could write. I don't know if this actually tells us anything useful, but it's like if write some garbage in there. If UI equals UI update, that equals.
I think the problem is pretty simple. I think the problem is just that there's always the current index we keep incrementing, so. By the time we reach an item, if we can reach the item in the update, it's always going to increment. Eventually, we'll be landing on the right one because we go through each item when we do the update. So every single time we do the item, it's like, is it so? Current index is 0. The first item we're going to render is option like start, and then current index is 0 is not equal to 4. But then we're going to increment this index, and by the time we get down to whichever one we picked, it's going to say, oh yeah, the current index, you are the selected index, therefore we exit. Like the current index really shouldn't be incremented every time we visit the update menu, or we need yet another counter.
Are you sure about that? Because keep in mind that every time we hit the begin, the current index gets reset to 0. So, well, why don't we try this in the debugger?
Yes, yeah, I am sure, because we hit begin, but then we visit every item. It's just a matter, like, any selected index I pick, by the time I've rendered all of the items, it's going to be true that one of them is going to be my selected one. So well, yeah, I think so, because it starts at current index, sure, it's 0, but then we call begin, and then we call item. So pick a number, 3. Okay, I'm going to draw this item. I'm going to visit this item, and then that one's correct. And because I'm hitting space, we're done.
Right. But keep in mind that Do you want to show me your logic in the debugger? Like, If
Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I can do that. Um, sure. Yeah, I'll start here. I'll just put a breakpoint on update begin. Oh, actually, what I'll yeah, sorry, I'm not as savvy as you on the debugger, but what I
Well,
think I'll do
that's all right.
is I'll start it again, and then okay, I'm gonna pick network game. Okay, so my index is 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it's gonna be hard to. How would I? I want to do this. I want to press a space bar and then start debugging, but I don't want to start from here.
Well, let me show you a
Um,
little trick that's good for that. So probably the best place. Well, where would you like to break? Is really the question. Is it in
it's I want to.
UI update
Um,
dot begin?
no, I want to break on. I want to hit the space and then break on main menu,
Okay, so just
or right here actually, right here, 108. But
okay, just yeah, yep.
yeah,
In draw.
no, sorry, this one.
Okay, so let's do that. This is actually really simple. If input.key went down,
Oh,
keys
sure.
dot
Okay.
space debugger, and you have to bring in system diagnostics dot break.
I forgot about that one.
So this is
Oh.
a handy little trick. If you need a debugger break, something like that, you can do this in other ways. I guess the other thing you can do is change this to like just be like just remove this and be like true. Oh, can I undo that? Thank you.
Right. Although I think in this case it would happen automatically. But all right. I'll show you what I think is happening. Okay. So all I got to do is I'm gonna pick 2, right, as my selected index.
Yep.
Network game. Press the space bar. Okay. Now I'm gonna visit the menu, right? And right now it's at 0. Remember I picked 2. Now I go into the main menu, and now I'm gonna loop through every single one. Current index is now 1. Current index is now. Okay, so it's not that one, but now I just incremented it, so now it's 2. All right, next one. Oh, it's 2. Have a nice day. Done. And now I've exited. Right?
Uh-huh.
So because every time we visit, so we're treating the current index. We're treating, but it's supposed to be the visiting index.
Hang on. Slow down a second. Slow down a second.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would suggest to you is do the same thing you just did, but when you get to return true, we'll do something different.
Oh, sure thing.
In fact, you're there.
Oh, I exited.
Yep. That's all right. So let's do the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, 0.
Current index 0. Yep.
And
And actually, you can see what I have here on my debugger view. I've actually got the watch window set up to view
right.
current index and selected index. But carry on.
Oh, sure.
So start
right,
game,
so,
network
yep.
game. So step into network game. Current index is selected index. That should be true. If key went down, key space. Now we get to return true. Now this is going to return true. So step out. So you'll see that we're returning true from network game.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
So the
All
question
right, I'll keep going.
The question is,
but
how do you get return true from the other one, from
Right.
exit?
I'm still 2 and 2 for some. Oh, that's weird. When you return true, you never increment. That's the bug.
That's the bug.
Oh, okay. I wasn't. Yeah, you're right. I was wrong, but it led me to the right answer.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a sneaky little one. What I was
In fact, couldn't we just do this? Like maybe just do this guy here. Boom.
that's not a bad way to do it. What I'm going to suggest though, just for like this is one of those occasions where you add a bit of clarity to the code, particularly because it's not a performance sensitive thing, by doing bool result equals false I think that's a little clearer. Well, certainly it's more order independent, because you can imagine maybe we'd add something like another, if we were to do, if we had the plus plus there, if we did that and then like wanted to do something like that, for example, we couldn't do it, or we wanted to check some other condition.
What just happened? Oh, sorry. No, that's ReSharper trying to be funny, but it's just making things worse. Okay. Yep. All right. Good enough. Oh yeah, I don't like the comments here. Okay. So.
Yep. Okay. So we fixed that bug.
Yay.
So I think when you do this kind of programming, like that's the sort of bug you get. It's like, oh, whoops, I just messed up. Like if the most complicated thing in your code is like an if statement, then that's where your bugs are. And they're fairly shallow. It's like, well, it's somewhere in this method. And it's like, well, it's not that much code, so it's pretty easy to find. So
right.
Now let's get back to sort of a design thing. And one other thing that I wanted to mention about that, and I don't know how we're feeling about this so far. I think we keep going again, but one of the downsides of having this override thing here, and that is like if it's like item, I want to go to definition and I end up here. And so that's just sort of one of the things that makes debugging this a bit harder. It's like I want to go to the item and it's like, oh, I have to go and view call hierarchy and calls to that, and there's calls overrides. Here we go. And then I was like, oh, okay, there's the thing.
Right. Oh yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, that's such a prevalent thing that like ReSharper has go to implementation and I can just pick which one I want.
Exactly. Exactly. Which is still fine, but it's like which implementation. So we're still okay for now, but that's something we should keep in mind. So getting back to this little sucker, and this is the item that comes back and goes away. And we'll also sort of think about how we can deal with the fact that main menu is like not actually an item.
Yeah,
so
neither are labels at the bottom. Like labels aren't items. I guess like a label is an item, or an item is a label that is selectable.
Exactly.
But we're not really.
So let's try and come up with a way to solve this problem. And this is like a design issue. So what do we want to have happen? I think it's pretty obvious what we want to have happen when the option appears in the menu, and that is like if we're on exit, we want to stay on exit, and if we're on options, we want to stay on options, even when this one gets inserted. But when this one gets deleted, what do we want to have happen to the caret?
That's a good question. I guess, I don't know, should it go up one or down one? I guess it doesn't really matter. Well, no, it should probably, it should stay where, when haha's gone, we should be selecting exit after it's gone. If we're on exit / haha. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't think there's any right answer here, and I think it's probably a case of like implement it, and if one option is no good, we'll just change to the other one. I don't think it's probably that difficult to change after we've done it. So let's just say we're gonna, if the option goes away, we'll try and retain the same index. But now the question is, what do we do in this case? Like if we're there, where are we going to go? We're just going to go up to exit?
I mean, I've never dealt with a dynamic menu like that, but I think instinctually I would think either you go to exit or you actually just go to the top. Because I mean, the item's not really there, so now that it's gone, you probably can't make a safe choice about what they were going to do. So maybe
in fact,
go to the top.
That's maybe a smarter thing to do, just to get the implementation done. And that is, if an option goes away, if we thought we were on an option and it goes away, we should just reset to this top of the menu, because we're going to have to implement go to the top of the menu to begin with for like startup.
And for like maybe for wraparound if we're going to do that.
Yeah, we'll use that for wraparound too. So let's hold off on like switching to the previous menu option or something. Like that might be useful if you've got like a really long menu or something like that. But the idea of the option that you're currently sitting on going away is actually kind of unusual. So maybe in fact, now that I think about it, like I'm imagining a options menu, and it's like if if
Network.
options is checked, and like this is like a checkbox, and then we have like a bunch of items that appear, and so it's like the items appear and disappear when you're on a different item anyway. So that's probably actually
right. Although you could imagine a case where like an item like goes away because like say the host dropped.
Yeah, like if you're selecting a user from a list of users on a network game.
Right. Although sometimes yeah, exactly. That would be a really good case of them dropping out as opposed to like graying it out or something. So yeah. So in which case, I think they would bounce us to the top of the menu because that person is gone.
Okay. All right. So let's call that the implementation. So we need to. So in fact, that tells us to begin with that the first thing we need to do is when we start up, we need to start at the first item. So let's start with that.
Okay. So the first item. Just a second here. The label for does the label increment when we're doing UI update? It does.
Yeah. So UI update, we're getting insertion points.
Right. I'm just trying to think. Like the first item is actually the second in the list because it's it's not the first. Right. Well, hold on. Okay. So selected index needs to become not just 0, but the first item this should be set when I'm the first item, but I don't know if I wanted how to do that I don't want to track state. Oh, I could just maybe do this -1 thing.
Well, what I might suggest to you is that we already know that we're going to be adding and removing items. That's just a feature that we're going to want to have. And so how we might want to handle this is making it not index based. And we talked about that a little bit last time. So we may want to make selected index a string instead of a index.
Interesting. Okay. There's no issues with the fact that the string is immutable, right?
Exactly. So I mean this is going to be a reference, and it's going to be a reference to one of these, so we're not even creating garbage when we do this. And what we might want to do eventually is be like, this is the identifier, and like, this is like the actual string, and maybe, and then we could like insert stuff or, use our string builder, and so on. So item.
Yeah, I added.
Oh yeah,
just
that's
added
clever.
this
That's a good thought.
Current index will have to be a string.
So I've just called it selected now because it's not really an index.
Right. Good point. Not sure what to do about this guy. We got to compare. Oh no, just have to compare select text with selected. Although this is kind of like maybe this has to go further down. There's a possibility that it's a possibility that I guess it's rare, but if we started with this, it doesn't matter. If we started and hit the space, we're fine. Sorry, I was thinking about an ordering problem here, but I don't think it's a problem.
Well, I've just thought of an issue, and I'm pondering whether we want to actually even bother solving this issue. And that is what happens when the user does something like that for some reason.
Yeah, in that case, the implicit ID is equal. We probably want to throw. But
so
I mean,
let's stick a
then we'd have to
in
track
there.
all the state, though. I don't want to do that.
So I believe what in fact
We need a bloom filter.
I think
Yay!
ultimately what the ImGUI does is actually has a dictionary or something. So it's like this is options 1, and then the next one is options 2, and
Right.
this identifier is not a string, but it's a string and an index.
Right, like a struct that
Yeah.
represents both pieces, like a tuple.
So I think for now we'll just keep going with this. So where
Yeah.
are we at?
Okay.
This
Yeah, I've just got to fix end.
Okay, so then we did some selection stuff.
Yeah, so so that's interesting. See, because I don't have the items. So when I press key up, it's like, I don't have an index anymore. Maybe I still need an index.
So we do need some way to handle going up and down.
Yeah, so we kind of do need this struct of string and int.
What I will point
already.
out, I think at this point, is current index is never read. So we could get rid of current index just to simplify the code as well.
Yeah.
So now, in fact, it's really simple. It's just item and end. And I'll just switch my order around because make it the same as yours. Actually, now I'm going to put. I feel like they should be at the top because we're going to have a lot of these things.
That's true. Yeah, I still have to. I mean, other than yeah, I don't want to keep a list of strings, so I'm assuming what I need to do is make this into a struct.
Well, we don't need to make that a struct for now.
Okay.
I don't think, because that's just an identifier of which string is selected. So I mean, we can just test this for now. We'll just get rid of that and just run it and see what happens. So we get some build errors. So let's comment out end for now and then try and do it from there. And we get to this bug here. But this is actually now kind of simple because it's like selected equals text. And we do need to keep current index here because that tells us our insertion point for drawing. But in theory, this should work. And now while we can't move it up and down, it's setting our caret on the correct item, which is good.
Right.
So, yeah, we can probably get rid of the debugger break. I think there you go.
No, I'm not confident enough. I'll just comment it out.
Yeah, I just thought, I'm like, maybe we'll leave that in for now.
Yeah, so I mean, up and down. Hard to go up and down without holding the state of the items that we've seen, or an index. So
we could do this in two different ways. We could do this we can do this in end, or we can do this in item. And this is one of these things where it's like, well, I don't know which one it's best to do it in. So any thoughts on that matter?
I think so far it seems like everything we're doing kind of needs to be in item because it's sort of where we have, well, that's where all the logic is. I mean, it's kind of interesting that like begin and end we're not actually using. And I think, no, I don't know. I mean, that's, so if we go up and we're on this text, the information I have in item is like, the item that I'm going to, and then yeah, it's kind of weird to do it in item as well, because item is sort of like supposed to only do one thing, which is like run the logic to tell me if we've selected it or not. It's kind of weird to then I'm gonna mutate like some state as well to like move the thing up and down.
Well, just sort of roughly explain to me how you think we would do it if we did it in end. Just very briefly.
I still don't know how I do it without an index, so I would probably just do the index thing.
Okay.
Because I don't have an ability to see what the next item is going to be.
Well, once we reach end, you in fact
Have seen all of the items.
you
Yeah.
will have seen all the items, so you will be able to store.
Right.
the
Well, I'm
items.
trying to avoid storing. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to avoid storing, but that's sort of the only
well,
thing that I'm thinking of.
Put everything on the like this. This is when you're coming up with code like this. Certainly worth putting everything on the table. It's like one thing we could do is store the items. If you
Yeah, just
store
throw it in a bag every time we hit item. Clear it at in begin, and then
so
at the end I've got a list of strings.
in fact, the simplest thing we could do is we could in fact just go list string. That's not unreasonable. That is actually well, now that I think about it, that is actually a reasonable option. And the reason that it is a reasonable option is it simplifies a lot of code. The way that I was thinking of it is doing it this way. String
Okay. Storing two strings. Yeah. Okay.
and so we could fill those out in item as we find them.
That's right.
But now that I think about it, now that you say list, it's
Yeah, that won't help us get to the top of the. Oh, no, it could. We could say, well, if we're gonna do the wrap, selected next is actually the first item.
we just set it
But
to null.
would we ever be able to find the first item? I don't think we could.
Well, no. We just set it to null and be like, well, we didn't find it. So, like in end, it's
Oh,
like
yeah. Yeah.
we probably have a boolean like bool selected found, or in fact, it would be selected prior equals zeros. So it's like prior equals null, and then if you get to the end and you haven't found it, so it's like if selected prior equals null, selected equals null, because if we never set selected prior, and then you get to here, it's like text equals selected, and if text equals selected, then we can do prior equals, and then we have to store last, I guess. And so this actually, now that I look at this, like while this is totally doable, and I totally implement the system like this for something high performance, and I do it more carefully, so minimize the amount of storage and stuff. Which raises an interesting point, and that is update needs to know what is selected between frames, and the network needs to store what's between frames, but we actually want to reduce the amount of stuff being stored between frames, but we can store as much as we like during frames. So you remember in River City we had update context.
Yeah, and then it's like fill
And then that
this
had
junk and then clear it at the end.
Yeah, well, and it had like lists of like stuff you found during the frame and stuff that we could then throw away. So we may in fact want to consider that as another thing later on. But for now, because in fact that was a good suggestion, let's do it this way.
We don't. Do we care? I mean, I know I shouldn't even think this anymore, but we don't care that it's the clear on this is going to be on, right? Because no one's going to have like a billion items, so it doesn't really matter.
That's also a good point. And yeah, thinking about it, normally in so about the fact that a reference list in C# is on because it actually has to go and zero out the memory rather than just setting the count to 0, because the garbage collector doesn't understand whether like the fact that it's a list. And because there's only ever going to be like maybe 100 items maximum, that's nothing. Like you can clear 100, well, that'd be 400 bytes, like that. The other thing that I wanted to say before we move on, and that is, if you're doing it this way, it might be nice to put it in end. Like it might become useful to put this thing in end, but it's actually probably better to do it in item, simply because you in fact will not need to store stuff and then just do the same thing in end. Like, does that make sense? Like I'm figuring out what selected prior is, and then once I get to end, I'm like, oh well, now let's do something with it. I may as well do something with it straight away and leave end simple, and that probably also removes the need for storage.
I see.
So if you are doing it the selected prior way, that's sort of the correct answer, I guess, to that question that I posed before. Is like, do you do it in item or end? It's like, well, if I can do it in item and I don't have to store anything and do it later in end, I'd do it straight away.
But how would the selected prior system work if, for example, like you had to skip over disabled items, and so in fact you had to skip down twice? I guess that would all be done in item.
We wouldn't be storing last, like in like label or item, bool disabled. If disabled last, last equals text or whatever.
Right.
You get the idea. So this is a way to do it. But for now, let's do it the list way because that's actually clever. So right, items list begin. Go to items dot clear. Okay.
And then,
so this is like storing last. It's like, whoops. Instead of going last equals text, we're like items.add text. And this solves a whole lot of problems, like what if you have duplicated items and stuff. And so...
just trying to think, we still don't have an indexed into where we are in the list, and I don't want to iterate just to get that.
Well, iterating is not a ridiculous option, but yeah, you're right. We can actually do it like this. I actually finished one writing. And then once we have that, we can fiddle with it. So then that would look like it's last, and in fact that would be done here, and then last equals text. So you can see how this would work. But in this case, rather than doing that, we're doing selected index equals items dot count, and then we add the one in the count position.
Yeah, I like that because you don't have to do any iteration.
Keep in mind that as with the last thing, you have to set last after you set the prior. So in this case, it's like have to set the index before you add the item. So I was going to write this to do, and it's like don't store things.
We don't really need selected anymore, though, do we?
Well, that's part of, in fact, the network thing, and that is, yeah, you don't in fact need selected, but in between frames, like if on end, this is what we'll want to do. It'll be like items.clear.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Selected index equals 0. It would basically be the same as began.
Right, and this is very update context like in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And so you could pass that in, although you need it on every call, so it's like you're going to have to store at least a pointer, but then you could make that pointer non-serialized. So yeah, if anyone watching at home who's wondering what this is all about, it's like a weird quirk of the network serialization system. You only need to store things that persist between frames, and the selected item definitely persists between frames, but the stuff we gather doesn't persist, or doesn't need to persist, and we want to not store it. So we'll worry about that later. So now all we have to do is figure out what the selected index is, which we have. Selected index can go up or down. And so we actually have to do something slightly more interesting here. So first of all, we'll start with the default as -1. It's probably a smarter thing to do. In fact, we don't need to worry about that in end. That was just sort of example, because we clear it in begin, and then we'll implicitly clear it later when we worry about getting rid of the storage.
I think we can get rid of this too, right? Because if we did this, selected would be out of sync with selected index, right?
Yeah. So selected. Yeah. We'll get to.
Maybe we do that in end. So we just say
in
selected
end,
is.
In end, we'll want to now figure out what the situation is. The other reason we want to store selected is, I guess, if we're drawing it, and it's the same issue actually. It's like we want to not store these. It's exactly the same issue. So never mind that. So now we have to do some processing at end to make this actually work. Selected equals items not selected index. So
kind of weird that we're doing the same thing in begin and end.
Oh yeah, I got rid of that. In fact.
Oh, you do it in begin only?
Yeah, it's like we would do it in end just for like coda safety. Like just.
Yeah, it's like the reset at the end of the update context.
To make sure no one's relying on it outside ourselves. In fact, it doesn't matter because these are private. In fact, what we might do is just like private and be like, actually, I don't want anyone touching these.
Gotcha.
So let's try and fix this up. So first of all, this will crash because you'll get an index out of bounds error.
Oh, poop. Yeah. Do I have to do range check or just get rid of it?
Well, there's a couple of possible options. If
do it in items probably.
Well, if there are no items, we have to deal with the case where there are 0 items and then nothing is selected.
Right, but if we do it in item, we don't have to do that because it'll get checked by the, like we just won't ever visit it, so it won't matter. Like it's probably, I'm wondering if it's better to just take this and put it in here.
No, because hitting space is like focus is different.
Oh, poop. Yeah, right. This is actually just
yeah.
Selected item is like not the action of selecting; it's the intent to select. Okay.
So anyway. In fact, we could go through and like rename it like focus.
Right.
Whoops.
Gotcha.
That might make
anyway
that more clear. So this is what we want to do. So we want to cover these cases. 0 items, item goes away.
Do we ever care? Like, are we ever gonna look at focus for end though? I guess not, because we have the item index now, so we don't really care about it anymore. It's just for the inter-frame storage.
So these are.
Although, doesn't that mean when you deserialize, you have to iterate the list again just to find where your selected is?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand quite what you mean there.
Well, I mean, so at the end of the frame, we set the focus, and then, when we deserialize, like in the event of a rollback, and all we have is the selected or the focus string, wouldn't we then have to go, okay, we only have the focus string, so now we have to go like for each item?
No, because I mean that's what we're doing every single time. We're gathering the items in item, which is in
right,
update, and then of course in draw we're just like, okay, we know what the focus was.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why I asked that.
No, it's a
I
reasonable
always
question.
have
It's
like
just
5 frames of mental delay when I talk about the network.
So these are the states that we want to deal with. So thoughts?
Right. Well, we can early out for 0 items, I guess. We don't have to do anything.
I think in fact I've said something that maybe I shouldn't have said or shouldn't have done. I think we actually do want the default to be 0 because that just gives us a really easy way to code this. Because now we can just be like, well, if that's out of range, so I think in all cases we want to do this, like adjust the focus index because we've stored the focus index correctly here. And so now we can just say, well, if it's out of range, less than 0 equals.
Right. We could have. It could be like -1 or count +1 or count right now. This index equals items count -1. So that's gonna be. Well, that's the thing. Don't you want to wrap backwards? Like, yeah, that's wrap. But this isn't wrapping. Oh yeah, it is. That's wrapping from end to beginning right here. Sorry, from beginning to end, and then.
Yes.
Right, and then, yeah.
So by having the default be 0, so if we have no items found, we start at 0. So we don't have to deal with, like, otherwise we just have to be like, if is, focus index is -1, make it 0. It's like, well, we may as well just make it 0 to begin with. And then if we do the input and then check whether we're in range, we can sort of save ourselves fussing about that.
Right.
And then all we have to do is set focus.
Silly component developer thing is like, we've implemented wrap, but some people might just want this to make you can't do that sound, like a nav negative sound, and not wrap. I mean, we're going to worry about that later, I'm assuming, but like, is that going to be something that we give from a configurability point of view, or we don't care? We're just building it for our purpose, and if we wanted to change it, we would just change the code.
That's a nice thing about this, and that is, first of all, if we wanted to do that, we'd be like UI no wrap or something like this, and then just store it in update and like just during the frame. So it's no network storage for that kind of configuration either, but we will need like transient storage, and then you just be like if no wrap.
Right.
And then do what you need to do.
I really love how you can basically, like, because of this functional pattern, you can basically like take all the state that you need to to make the feature you want, because you're always passing all of that in the methods, so you don't have to retain anything
Exactly.
other than that little string in the focus. So it's pretty svelte.
Exactly. And if I can also direct your attention to the fact that we could do this, and which we will probably eventually do, and then if we want something very specific over in here, we'd just be like, if UI.drawing, and then do the drawing thing, else, and then update, and then we can stick in our own update logic here, and do whatever we want to do, and use whatever state information we want. We could add stuff to our own state objects, fill it in, that sort of thing.
Right.
So it's quite a powerful technique. It's the only unfortunate thing is it's got this, because of what we want to do with draw and update separate, we actually have this ugly virtual table, but that's fine. That's not a huge deal. So let's just finish off here. This is the last thing we have to do, I think, is just make sure we're setting focus correctly. So I'll leave that to you, because I did the wraparound.
Yeah, okay, you did the wraparound. So we should have a valid focus index at this point. So isn't it done? We just have to worry about 0 items.
So yeah, we in fact have a valid focus index unless there are 0 items, in which case we'll get index out of range, because I'm pretty sure that this is never going to go out of range unless there's 0 items. And so
but I was figuring we could early this out earlier than all of this, no? Because there's no point in validating focus index, and there's no point in checking the up and down on 0. So we could throw that.
That's actually a really valid point. Let's do that.
But maybe we have to set the focus in. No, we don't, because we're not even going to check it, because we're never going to get to that point. So this is probably enough.
That's actually true. We can retain focus. So you can imagine a menu where all of the items go away and then they come back. Although we actually no. So yeah, that's fine. You could.
Maybe we should set focus to something else.
So we couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So, but in fact, this will work too. It will just work differently.
Well, it'll work unless if it was something, if it was 5 items and then they all went away, like you said, that focus will stay unless we 0 it out.
So I could do this and see what happens. We'll try that in a second. So I think that's everything. So we handle the case where there's 0 items. We handle the case if item goes away. Do we? Because focus index will be 0. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then at startup, focus index will be 0 because we hit 0 in begin. And then we move up and down with these things, and then we do wrapping if we go outside of range. So I think that's working. So let's try it. Let's run this sucker. So first of all, we're wrapping around. This is great. We don't exit when we hit network game, but we exit when we hit that one. Let's add in our haha option and see what happens there. Haha goes away, and we jump back up to start game. And if I put haha up here in the middle, yeah, so if we're on a haha, we go back to start game, which is fine. I think that's like a reasonable thing to do. There's no right answer. It's just like
It's the more paranoid thing to do, because if someone's like trigger happy, they could accidentally exit the game or something. So it's sort of like, I have no idea what you want to do. The thing is gone now, so let's give up and start over.
Well, you can imagine.
Like
you can imagine a menu where these are network players that you're trying to kick from a game, and someone's being a pain in the ass, and you're trying to kick them from the game, and you hit enter just as they exit themselves. And so if you make option 1 something that does something safe rather than kicking the player 0, then you're sort of in a safe position when they go offline.
Right.
So let's what happens when the whole menu goes away? So we go back up to start game. But if we get rid of this, what I predict will happen is it will keep its option. Yeah, so that's an interesting sort of way of handling that. Is having the option stay selected if there's nothing else to be on. But for now,
Right.
this is
Which is
fine.
technically not wrong, right? It's not like you didn't elect to not be focused on that anymore. The menu went away. It's not your fault.
Yeah. So it's sort of a lot of these decisions are design decisions rather than coding decisions. So
Right.
I think we probably don't need this comment like this code tells us. What do you reckon? You reckon we?
Yeah, no, I think I can read it.
We'll keep our code well commented because people might like to see that. Yeah, I think that's everything. This is a cool little menu we've got going. All right, so for the kind people on YouTube, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.